All right. Did you have a wonderful break? Excellent. So, I don't know if I have any more pearls of wisdom for you, because we did the pearl meditation. Okay. Well, anyway, uh, see, the joke is how bad joke is. It's a specific type of joke. Let's get on with our day today. So, and I just want to check these notes of mine to see where we're at. Yes, excellent. So we spoke about the kind of the importance of understanding developmental levels in the path of awakening. I did want to give you a couple little shorthands as we go, because I find codes and shorthands and mnemonics make everything better. So one little system that I like comes from Ken Wilber, which I really enjoy his 2017 book called The Religion of Tomorrow, where he does a really big gargantuan task of trying to correlate a lot of developmental psychology and philosophy and Vedanta and Madhyamaka philosophy, and just like he does a really cool job of some of the same work that inspires me here. So if you're into that heady, verbose, and loquacious exploration of the inner life, I recommend Ken Wilber's The Religion of Tomorrow, 2017, published by Shambhala, probably. Anyway, you do not have to read that work because you're here in a workshop with me. And one thing I like of his work is that let me shut my door. That breaks are on different schedules. Partner and I are both teaching retreats at different ends of the house today. So one little system I like is that he has these kind of 4 code words of the tasks that you really want to do in this work of kind of personal development, spiritual growth, whatever you want to call it. So he says there's waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. Waking, growing, cleaning, showing. Ta-da! I mean, like spiritually, are you a grower or a show? No, that's not how it works. Waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. So what does this mean? Well, in one sense, waking up is very much kind of like in Zen and some of the Tibetan schools, they have this idea of the sudden path of awakening, which is where you recognize sort of like an innate lucidity or an innate compassion. And they say, it's already there. You don't have to give birth to that part. You just wake up to it, right? That's kind of what we were doing in our last module with the water element. If you let the thoughts settle down, or the old scripts from your parents or whatever, you realize, well, there's somebody there anyway. Without having to do anything, I amness is there, right? And you can listen to all sorts of spiritual types talk about, Eckhart Tolle's work is all about this. The famous Zen master Dogen, asked like, what in this moment is lacking? And you're supposed to, like, if you really think, you could come up with all sorts of stuff, but if you thought about that koan in a moment of meditation, it's like, well, no, the moment is what it is. Nothing's lacking because it is itself. And there's this like wake up experience. Okay, this experience itself is sometimes extremely destabilizing to people. In the Zen tradition, of which I am an ordinee, they call this sometimes the Zen sickness. And if you don't necessarily want to read a big heady book, you could read the autobiography of Master Hakuin, which is published under the name Wild Ivy, also by Shambhala. And Master Hakuin is a famous Zen master who had the Zen sickness. He practiced until he had an experience of waking up, and like the exertion of his practice also screwed him up, He walked around like with heart palpitations and like sweating all the time. So in his case, and the cool thing at the end of the story is that he finds a Taoist master who teaches him inner alchemy. He says the Taoist master is like, well, just put your awareness on your lower abdomen. And it like fixed his problem that he had for years and years and years. And it's like, oh yeah, inner alchemy. Other people though, the Zen sickness is sometimes characterized by like, you wake up to like the unreality of the world, and then you go a little loco for a while. You're like, wait, so much of what I thought was arbitrary. And it would be nice if you had a monastery around you at that time, right? Because it's kind of like when you take two, the stories say when you take too heroic a dose of acid or something, and it's just like it destabilizes your world, dude. Like, what's real? I had this when I was 15. Sometimes I tell this story. Sorry if I'm boring you by telling it again, but I had a dream that was so vivid that when I woke up, I was afraid I was still dreaming and I could not figure out what the hell was what. And it took like 2 years of gruesome inner work. I mean, somehow I still did high school, but only one period a day. I just ditched the rest of them. And, somehow like I stayed alive. I didn't get institutionalized. I'm not sure how I skirted that, probably because there's no socialized medicine in our country. But anyway, it took me like 2 years. And then one day I came on Rene Descartes' famous slogan, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. And it hit me like, oh, wait, I can at least know that somebody here is confused. Like, if I'm here to wonder about what the hell's going on, I at least know that guy's real. And I sort of rebuilt my reality on Descartes' foundation. Anyway, better not talk until my voice gives out, or I'll be putting Descartes before the horse. All right, I did not promise the jokes would be any good today. But this is a version of the Zen sickness that for me, that wasn't brought on by Zen. It was brought on by a liminal state though, which is what meditation brings on. Now I have to figure out where I was. Oh yeah, waking up. So ideally though, we have softer, kinder experiences of waking up. Like instead of the alarm clocks we had in the 80s, and there was one volume, there was one sound. They were all red LED alarm clocks. And then before that, they went like that was all you had. Now we've got iPhones and you can choose like wind chimes or trance zone music. And like, and when I wake up in the morning, my little iPhone is like that would be cool if we could have wake up experiences like that. Anyway, this is a part of the spiritual path. In intimacy, there are moments where like people sometimes have awakening experiences when they have their first child, and they look in the eyes of that baby, and all the baby has is I am presence. Like they don't have any of the other stuff yet, and the baby like wakes up your I am presence, and then you go, oh whoa, we are. And it's like it's this radical, sudden awakening. I know some grumpy patriarchy bound dudes who totally healed their internalized misogyny when they had their first grandkid. And now they're like soft people with little dogs and stuff. It's still tough and they could fix your plumbing and whatever. But like they saw this innocent thing and it woke up a little innocent thing in them. Dude, waking up. Cool. Okay. Then growing up, put a blanket on. It's cold without the door open to the wood stove. Come on now, guys. Okay. So with waking up, but then growing up is also a thing. Growing up, in case you haven't heard about it, back in the 60s and 70s, there was a big taxi driver to guru pipeline. Because gullible Americans would believe that if you were from India, you were obviously a spiritually enlightened master. And so people would fly over here where all the money is and set themselves up as Guru Shmuru. And then, but a week ago, they were a taxi driver. Okay, that's not the problem I wanted to tell you about, though. There's also a problem of authentic spiritual masters from long lineage traditions who have had verified experiences of waking up. Like if you put them in the fMRI machine, they'd have the brain patterns of other people who are like these, whoa, insightful homies. And they have a real problem. It's been shown with like sleeping with their married students, with manipulating their underage students to become part of their harem. And some of us who are into spiritual stuff, we look at this and we're like, what in the hell is going? Like, I thought you had these experiences of awakening. Yes. And their emotional development is that of a teenager, right? They have not grown up to the degree of their waking up. And so it's a paradox if you don't know that these are two different things. One does not necessarily imply the other. Like there's some people who are great business people, or even like marriage and family therapists who have a great relationship, like, oh, they're good at that. And then you're like, hey, yeah, but what about intrinsic presence? And they're like, what the fuck is that? Like they're not, the one doesn't imply the other. But we do expect, like if somebody knows what a chakra feels like and you get together and you're like, whoa, I think my chakras are opening like in your presence, we think they should know about a good marriage. And they absolutely don't. This is a statement you can verify. Because the growing up is a different line of development. So what Wilbur proposed, which is like, I was like, oh, thank God somebody wrote this down. Like it makes so much sense, is that any path of integrated development needs growing up and waking up, right? To have this sort of full expression of our humanity. So that's cool. And that's why, you're helping me develop this course, which is like, okay, here are meditative states. Here, how are these aligned to the work you failed to do in your teenage years, right? And you may have failed to do that in a monastery or in high school, whichever environment you were in. We all grow up with various insults and injuries or opportunities, and we're going to have work to do in there. Excuse me. Okay, then that brings us to the cleaning up, which is for those of us who are engaging in a path of like this kind of work, these meditative works. One of the reasons you can get Zen sickness or spiritual emergency is they are rapid forms of personal development. That's, I mean, I don't have a study to show you, but that's kind of a research verified statement. When you start people meditating, when you start people doing compassion practice, it amps up their inner growth and transformation process. If we have these old injuries in the path, it's very much like if you start learning to work out or do a sport. The faster you want to progress, the more you're going to have someone who knows how to deal with injuries or old injuries or crummy patterns of movement, right? So like if I have my partner's 25-pound kettlebell, it's pretty, hers is prettier than mine are, because it helps. This is not a gender essentialism thing. It's just the two of us who live in this household. I'm like, yeah, ugly kettlebells, this is great. She's like, this one looks nice, I'll work out with it. I don't know. Anyway, hers is prettier and a little lighter. And when I do the kettlebell press, doesn't matter how many I do or how careful I am, it doesn't hurt my shoulders. But when I swing my 45-pound one, if I do one wrong, I will have shoulder pain the next day, because like that's going to grow my strength faster using those heavier ones. But to grow faster, I have to be more aligned. So similarly, the cleaning up is where we are actively going to look into where these developmental tasks may have gotten a hiccup in the growing up, or when we, like in my case at 15, my waking up impacted my growing up negatively. Like I could not sit in a stupid high school class where nobody knew that nothing was real and they were going to tell me how stuff was. So I was like, bro, what are you talking about? So my development was sidetracked, much like a lot of the kids in the 60s were. And these things, we actually, if we want to live full, holistic, human lives, wholehearted lives, we're gonna need to go back and actually clean up some of what got impacted before. Just like I, as a massage therapist, clean up people's Achilles tendons when they try to get back into working out and they realize it's hindering their progress. Okay, and then showing up. What do you think that one's about? I mean, showing up. Well, in my opinion, and this is more about our next module, the wind element, its C word is creative. That's like, okay, so once you've done some shadow work and you feel calm and curious, who cares? The idea is that that should be a gift unto others or a legacy unto humanity. It's even in Erik Erikson's developmental work. This is like the age group that I'm in, the 40 to 65. Like that's our developmental task, to feel like, oh, my life is actually contributing something to the field or to the literature, or to my buddies or to my progeny or whatever it is for you. So showing up is like, if you're a great meditator and there are inhumanities going on in your world and you never get off your damn cushion, is your path really complete? I don't know, like, what's the use of it? Seems it's kind of narcissistic then, isn't it? Similarly, we humans seem to have a naturally altruistic aspect to ourselves. And so if there wasn't a compassionate action portion in the path, it probably wouldn't feel complete. It wouldn't really be wholehearted living. So that's this model that I wanted to present to you, and sort of why we're diving into these, developmental tasks, and we're going to do shadow work later today. It's going to be really cool and weird. And it's because ideally we can balance waking, and I don't know where they go on the compass, waking, growing, cleaning, and showing. And all of these begin to serve one another, right? And we then come as this full spectrum, wholehearted being. Okay, what do you think about that? Any comments? Put them in the chat box or bring yourself on. We'll do a practice in a few minutes, but we're just in our chatting part at the moment. It says old news, new news. Do you disagree? Do you agree? What say they? It's okay. You don't have to say anything. You can just chew on it for a while. You can send your disagreement in a private email later. That's also fine. I always like to do that because, some people don't like to publicly disagree, but a healthy classroom should have space for it. So, okay. So then let's prepare intellectually for our next meditation. So it doesn't mean sit up straight and close your eyes yet, almost. Let's orient ourselves for the, Yeah. So the stage of development, we talked about early childhood. In this model, the earth element, we're doing secure attachment. We're earning secure attachment. We're repairing attachment trauma. We're creating, like, some developmentalists say, like, the feeling that you are home in the universe. That's what we want. And man, how many people's meditation path would have been made easier if they knew that was step one, right? Instead of try to make yourself feel less at home in the universe. Life is bad. Planet Earth is a, shithole country. Try to get out. And instead of that, they learn, like, okay, find a way to neurologically feel safe. Even if the rest of the day you're in traffic and you're in the boardroom or you're with your other activists and none of that feels safe, make meditation a place where you can come home and fill yourself up with safety. Like, that would be cool for people to know that's on the menu, right? That's available. That's not even a special. You could order that any day you want. Then the other aspect of secure attachment has to do with our water element, which is, the theorists say, the best thing you should know as a kid is that it's safe to explore. you're safe to explore. So we start from that secure attachment, and then we bring that into curiosity. And in that exploration, you begin to develop the consolidated sense of self, who is curious, who is spacious, who is joyful, who is open, who is loving. We are then at today, you've now grown up to be adolescents. Welcome. We're going to have a quinceañera for you. We're going to have a coming out party. You're an adolescent now. What's the bar mitzvah? Okay, it's time. And aren't these cool celebrations? I mean, at least maybe in essence, where it's like, yes, you're a full-fledged human now. You're 13, you're 15. Get out there, start humaning. And developmentally, at least according to that curriculum that I was inspired by, how they sort of simplified some of the work here is that now that you have a self, your very next job is that you're going to have to become comfortable with paradox and ambiguity, which can be a real bummer because your whole last work was to try to create stability, learn what the rules are, what do we have to conform to, we don't conform to that in this family. You still have this like anchor of conformity in your tribe, in your family. Now you turn into a teenager and everything's gone. There's hormone cascades, and there's like, here's what your church said, but they let you go to the sleepover at the other church, and then the pastor said something different, and like you're thinking your own thoughts, you're reading literature or not, or you're wondering why Johnny reads that literature and you're not allowed to. And like, what a wild, wild moment. So what this particular researcher that I got inspired by said was that the work of this time is to learn to become comfortable with paradox and ambiguity. That would be like many of us as adults really missed out on the chance to learn that. That's why it's in the course. Me still needs to learn that. That's part of that growing up and cleaning up. The cleaning up can be sometimes because like I was raised by fundamentalists, for example, not really mean ones, but like they knew what was true and this was our thing. And then I had to rebel against that, and I immediately became a fundamentalist Wiccan. and I polarized and like, okay, some things are right and some things are wrong. And there's a whole area of nuance that requires the safety and curiosity of the previous levels to even be able to begin to explore. One of the other facets of why this work is important in this class is that this comes from my work with people in relationships as well, coaching people in their spiritual partnerships. And one of the things that can happen is that we polarize unnecessarily. Well, I'm a neat person and he's a dirty person, and there's all of this nuance in between, like, well, did you guys think about hiring a housekeeper? But instead they go to judgment, and this stuff like leads to divorce, like ugly divorces, just based on these kind of polarizations, this intolerance of ambiguity. So the work we're doing today is about waking up to, growing up through, cleaning up from, so that we can show up in a nuanced, complex, paradoxical world and tolerate ambiguity. And ultimately, we'll get more of this later, integrate that all these various living energies as forms of, we could say, like spiritual nourishment. More on that later. Hopefully that sounds weird enough. They're like, I'm not sure about that. So stick around to see what I actually mean. See if you really disagree. Let's see what's in here. Yeah, there's nothing to do, just be. And then also the mastering something, setting goals. Yeah, and this is one of these, it's like a false dichotomy, right? It's not impossible that both of those could be cool. But the way our minds get trained in early education to become a self, we learn to go like, okay, things are like this, not like that. Things are like this, not like that. And then rarely do we get a chance to train the next advanced type of perception or cognition, which is the yes and. Things are like this and like that. Suzuki Roshi famously said, everything's already perfect and there's a lot of work to be done. And that is the waking up and growing up conjoined from a Zen master, right? In the Tibetan traditions, it's the sudden and the gradual schools. And the tantric traditions are said to be a union of sudden and gradual Buddhist practice, right? And so what they're doing is they're taking these seemingly dichotomous opposites and finding, in Sanskrit, they call it madhyamika, the middle way, which we'll get to this afternoon, is not going to be a murky, goopy blend of those, right? It's not 50-50, it's 100-100. We'll get there. Because otherwise you get these problems where people think, oh, the middle way, right? That means if I'm happy half the time and I'm sad half the time, well, then it all sort of balances out. Or, well, no, Buddha didn't want us swinging from the extreme, so just be mediocre all the time. And that's the middle way. That's not the middle way. We'll get to it this afternoon, but it is the middle way we could think of is the view, the point of view, or the space within that can integrate and embrace paradox, that can integrate and embrace polarity without polarizing, can dance in diversity without being, in Tantric Buddhism, they call this the wisdom of discrimination. And nowadays discrimination is like a bad word, right? Because we have like anti-discrimination clauses, right? But it really just means to see things in detail. And so there's this thing of like, oh, can we be discerning of diversity without being discriminating? That's saying some diversity is bad, some is good. This is a cool thing. I think our world desperately needs this skill, this neural skill. Okay, so there we go. What are we going to do? I'm going to get back on my train of thought and we're going to set up the meditation. So tolerance to ambiguity and paradox and integration of polarity is another way to say what we said at the beginning, maintaining an open-hearted stance toward all arising experiences, right? Kind of the same thing, but that's this, just finish this piece, this developmental tool, because one of the things that you may notice, how it was pointed out to me that really struck a chord, if you can remember being a teenager, or if you know any teenagers, they have a superpower if they haven't been taught to repress it, which is they can smell hypocrisy or duplicity. And it's really cool because they've just grown out of this, like, okay, you have to trust your parents, you have to trust your church, your tribe to be able to make a self effectively. And then you realize that, like, dad puts on a show of knowing what the hell's going on. And he actually, half the time at least, has no clue what's going on. And in the teenage brain, we're working with the only technology, the only architecture we have is, well, which one is he? Which one is he? And so you can get, like, in my teenage years, I went, oh, so they're not people who know what's going on and have your best interest at heart. They're liars. All the adults are just confused liars. Got it. Because all you have is this, which one is it? Is it one or the other? Some people go the other way and they go, oh, no, don't listen to that voice that says they might be, not telling you the truth. They always have your best interest and they know what's good for you, right? And you lock down on that. But if we can navigate this passage, what we learn is that dad, in this example, if you had one of those, is both somebody who has your best interest in mind 75% of the time, if you're lucky, and then gets really mad if he's hungry and looks like a crazy person. And those can both exist. It doesn't have to be one or the other, right? He can be totally confused when he lets his guard down and you catch him in the middle of his TV time. And the rest of the day, He's a guy who bosses everybody else around because he actually does know, or whatever your situation is. So learning that like both of those can be true in a human is a massive leap in consciousness that not all of us succeed in, actually. What this sets up, and then we'll finish our little talk for now, is the capacity to do that with yourself. So one of the challenges that can come in is if we don't get this with, dad, mom, my teacher, whoever some of these authority figures are, then in our teenage years, let's say you were raised in like a purity culture where sex is bad, but you are now 14 and your body is telling you sex is good, as much of it as possible. Propagate the species, propagate, be fruitful and multiply. The voice of the God, Mother Earth said inside, right? And now your mind has to figure out, am I a good person or am I a bad person? Those are your only two choices. Am I a clean, pure person or am I a slut? And you get internal fragmentation that eventually comes and bites you in the butt, right? It bites you in the butt psychologically or physically or relationally. And if we could recognize that, like, hey, you could be a person who chooses to save intimacy for deep and long-term commitment and wait until you're a little more mature, and you're still a horny little devil. And both of those can coexist, right? They don't have to be like, that's fine. Then you grow up with a person who doesn't have all these weird projections about who's a slut and who's a prude and, all of this kind of stuff. You see actual humans humaning, and in yourself, you see yourself humaning. So it's a really cool thing to do. And it's also quite hard. It was hard when we were young. Many of us never learned to do it. And it's hard when we're adults, and we might as well take up the challenge. What do you say? I don't know. I said take up the challenge, so I got really excited. But it looks like you seem moderately excited in a middle way, sort of way. Yeah, sounds fine. We're meditators. Don't get too excited. No, you can get excited and still meditate. So what are we going to do now, Mr. Notes? We're just in a moment of reviewing some of the stuff from our earlier modules because, as we said, foundation level, it's safe. This is what you need to know to grow through that foundation level healthfully. It's safe. Level 2, it's safe to explore. It's safe to explore. And with the explorer mindset, you can learn to tolerate and integrate ambiguity. So you can see how they kind of stack up. And good news, if you missed one of those developmental levels due to conditions, we can go back and do the cleaning up to facilitate our growing up through contemplative practices. Well, I got through my whole talk that I wanted to give you. So we're going to do a bit of practice with this. And this comes from our level 1 material, which is about the wise friend. The wise friend. So I'm first going to talk, this is kind of an intro contemplative meditation. So I'll kind of talk you through this. Feel free to keep your eyes open and interactive if you want, or go within if you want. And then we'll take it into a bit of a meditative practice to round out our afternoon. So, or our morning, that is. So this is the practice of the wise friend, the wise friend. I learned this terminology from cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's using wise friend as a way to overcome something they call automatic negative thoughts. Automatic negative thoughts. So these are things like, sometimes, related to what we were talking about, universalizing negative thoughts, such as, I always screw up my relationships. I'll never be a good meditator. Whatever it is. So let's do our first contemplation. Can you think of any of these that come up for you on the regular? Do you have any of these universalizing, automatic negative thoughts? I'm always crummy in this situation. This blah, blah, blah. People always are crummy to me in this situation, etc. Okay, let me think of, I have one so I can be honest. And if you feel particularly safe and extroverted, you can put it in the chat box if you want, but no pressure at all. Let's see. I'm too heavily meditated to think of one right now. I'm like, all is bliss. Is that a universal thought? Yeah, cool. Okay, but yeah, the law of should. So, but you get what I'm talking about with this, yeah? These universalizing, automatic, negative thoughts. Okay, so the trick with wise friend, yeah, lack of discipline and dedication. It happens. And it's one of these natural human things, right? We need life hacks for. But if we have this thought, we'll see any instance of that and we'll reinforce it by going, oh yeah, you always take up this and then fail. And so of course, then that becomes a prophecy and a self-fulfillment. So the answer, an answer, not the answer, we're in ambiguity day, but one answer is invoke wise friend. Invoke wise friend. So here's your next contemplation. Think of, if you had access to the coolest like guru disguised as a regular hip person who you could take out for coffee, but they were just unconditionally loving and wise. And you told them your universalizing automatic negative thought, what might they say to you? You know, you're out for coffee and they're like, hey, how you doing, bud? And you're like, oh, well, I took up another project and then I just forgot. I'm so inconsistent. I'm such a piece of crap, right? When you say that, what might wise friend say? Okay, I think Deborah's has trained in, what's her name? That one lady. Is that true? Right? You could just call it into question. Is that true? Yeah, Byron Katie. I'm not a fan of her persona, but I like her work, actually. Is that absolute? Can you absolutely know that it's true that you are a piece OS? No, like, no, the evidence is not in yet. Until your whole life has been done, and we've had some double-blind control style studies on it, it's impossible to say whether you're actually that POS or whether you fail at everything. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, what else might wise friend say to you? Like, just what would you want to hear? What would be the most healing? What do you think? If you don't mind, pop them in the chat box so I don't have to do all the work. What might wise friend say? Compared to what? Yeah, interesting, right? So we might be able to get some comparative gratitude about ourselves, considering how bad it might be. And like once you shake it up a little bit, the universality of that automatic negative thought, you know, it doesn't get to hold as easily, right? Sometimes if we are in like phobias or like panic attacks or something like that, one of the things that makes those terrible is that they feel like it's always been this way and it will always be that way. So if you were undergoing that and you had like the most highly trained sitter for those psilocybin mushroom studies that they're doing, and they knew just what to say when someone was panicking, what might they say? Right? They might, oh, you know, this will pass. Can you remember a time when it didn't feel this bad? Actually, I can. You know, this will pass, right? They might invoke pleasant impermanence for you. Thanks, wise friend. Yeah, they might just question your universality. Always, never, really? Like, so you found the one consistent thing in the world and it's your crumminess? Publish a paper. The world needs to know you finally found the thing we can all rely on. Is it you'll let us down? You know, like so we want a wise friend. These can be a little bit hard to come by in the outer world. You're lucky if you found one. I had a grandma who was like this. I mean, she was human. She had her flaws, but she was pretty good at doing wise friend, like helping me with that secure attachment figure. You might have a therapist who does this for you. Like that's a great role of a therapist, is you call them with your automatic negative thoughts and they go, hey, let's question that though. You know, maybe that's not the only way to see this. So wise friend, okay, how's this contemplation? Are we get a couple little wake up moments, or are this out of the realm of reality? Okay, we're just trying to point out some inner experiences. So what this wise friend metaphor relates to is what in that one school of psychology they call Rogerian unconditional positive regard, right? They say, like, to cultivate yourself as a great therapist, cultivate unconditional positive regard. It's similar to what we did with our Pearl in our last module. It's like, okay, whatever thought comes up, just don't attach to it. Like, and similarly with your clients, they say some stuff, man, and your job is to not be reactive. Just, okay, we all want to be free from suffering. we're trying our best. We got some weird ways of going about that, but here's my unconditional positive regard. So the meditation on wise friend that we'll be doing in a moment is to imagine that like a force from the universe. And the trick with this on the evidence-based side of things, there's an esoteric way to think of that, but is that our mind believes what we imagine. And it actually tells our body to act accordingly. So if you can call up the imagination of like, what if somebody just loved me and wow, they were so insightful and they wanted to give me that. And if you imagine that like shining at you like a light or something, or flowing at you like a wave, your body puts out little pleasure and healing chemicals as if it were happening. It's the best. It's the best. So this is wise friend, wise friend. Okay, pretty clear. That's one part. We're going to do second part, and then we're going to do it in a practice, in a silent practice. Okay, so the second part is wise friend within. If you get good at this, if in childhood you had good, easy, secure attachment, some people do. It's pretty cool. God bless them. It can actually be quite easy for them to develop an inner voice of unconditional compassion. Like, oh, thank God there are some people out in the world who got that. May it continue for them. For others of us, we need to grease the gears a little bit. We need some preparatory exercises for that. But this is going to be your second job, is to, and it's actually, I'm speaking of it like it's a growing up process, because there is that, but there's also a waking up process, that there's a part of you that wants you to thrive, or else you wouldn't be here, right? If that part like lost its function, you would not be with us today. So there's a part of you that wants you to thrive, no matter how caked over or kinked off it may have become. It's in there. And in the spiritual systems, they say there's actually a part of you that innately is in touch with this compassionate, wakeful awareness. So that you might have to take on faith a little bit. I think that's true. And so this we're going to call wise friend within. So you have wise friend without. And this is actually, this is just a secularized version of guru yoga for those of you who are into that sort of yogi stuff. And in the classic guru yoga, they say, oh yes, the outer guru, their purpose is to catalyze your awareness of the inner guru. The outer guru's purpose is to catalyze your awareness of the inner guru. So what we're going to do in this meditation, it's going to be a bit of a self-compassion practice. And we'll just meditate on creating that feeling like, oh, unconditional compassion is coming at you. And then in our little pearl, we're going to cultivate and sort of stoke up the feeling that unconditional compassion is also coming from me. So unconditional compassion comes to me, unconditional compassion comes from me, and we practice using the imagery and the somatic sense of that pearl as kind of the fusion of these two forces, like grace at large and being a force of grace from within, or an agent of grace. So let's try it and just see how that goes. It's a lot less formless than last module. Last module was like, sit there and count your breaths. And for some people, that's all you're going to want. No problem. Today is going to be like more diverse and wild and colorful. So let's do some guru yoga. I mean, cognitive behavioral therapy, self-compassion exercise. So find your posture. I love the upright if you can get it. But if you want to do this lying down or in the recliner, no problem. It won't hamper your progress at all. So please be comfortable. Take a couple sighs if you like, or you might even want to stretch out at this point. I didn't lead you in a stretch going from one type of sitting to the next type of sitting. So sometimes the body likes that and it'll help the meditation. And then find yourself in stable repose. I propose a state of repose. If you want, you could invoke the inner smile a bit, which is kind of a different flavor of the same thing we're about to do. You could regulate the breath like I'm about to with a sigh. Or you could use your 2-1 ratio breathing if that's your pleasure. Okay, and then the first part of our contemplative meditation is to develop the sense of that energy that we're calling wise friend. And with your open, kind of free associating state of mind, you could invite yourself to remember if ever there have been real life friends or relatives or mentors or even authors who represented this to you. And it doesn't have to be that they were always that. Maybe just in moments, they were able to offer you that sense of unconditional positive regard. And the most important part of this is a very somato-emotional practice. And so try to get the feeling, like when they were manifesting wise friendness, how did you feel? Or how did that feel? You could also, if memories don't come up, you could play the imagination game. Like, what would be if you could ask Santa for the perfect wise friend this year? What would be on your list? And again, we cultivate, how would that feel? Then letting go of the particulars and imagining then that, like, from the universe at large, this energy of compassion and grace and positive regard and blessing is just flowing to you. For me, I use the old Tibetan version where it's in front, and I almost feel like the rays of the sun are shining to me with this sense of blessing. But if some other fashion worked for you, you could do it that way too. And in this bath of grace or blessing or unconditional regard, let's take a moment and practice self-compassion through the 4 immeasurables. So you simply think to yourself, may I have happiness and the causes of happiness. And let yourself really have this wish. And imagine that like aligns with this energy of grace that flows to you in our imagination here. May I have happiness. And just imagine that like a blessing of happiness is flowing into you. And also, may I be free from suffering, from reactivity, from upset, from being overwhelmed by the pains of life. Imagine like you could invoke grace to flow in, safeguard you against these extremes of suffering. The third immeasurable, they say, may my joy increase. And that's kind of similar to happiness, but in our language here, it has to do with our growth. And may we continue to grow to ever expansive forms of open-heartedness. And just imagine that like a blessing force is feeding that in you. And finally, the fourth of the traditional four immeasurables is peace. May I dwell in peace and equanimity. So imagining that you're being blessed and calmed, pacified, quietened. Then imagining that this force of grace or luminosity flows in and it begins to consolidate into that little pearl down in your lower belly. As if when it swirls and twirls like a galaxy, it's pulling this grace, this blessing, this unconditional regard together and making it into a little jewel of light. And as that jewel forms or brightens up, imagine that that wakes up your qualities of inner friend, these qualities of unconditional compassion. And like our inner smile, without getting too detailed with it for our short meditation, but just imagine this pearl radiates light through you and it shines love to all your different parts. All the parts that everyone agrees are epic and all the parts that are pretty weird, but you're holding on to. And then even the parts that you don't like about yourself. Some of the parts that others like about you, but you don't like about yourself. All these various parts, imagine that this light of unconditionality awakens within and it shines like a blessing. May I be happy and free from suffering. May I grow to greater open-heartedness and peace. And then finally, feel and imagine that you're full of this sense of ease or blessing or comfort. And sometimes the meditations are difficult in this self-compassion, which you could take time for, or some days you just imagine, okay, what would it be like if I were good at this? And you can just go there, jump to the end for now. So we imagine ourselves filled with this loving, peaceful emotion, self-acceptance. So much so that from this jewel down in the belly, this radiance starts to shine out into the world. And it gives a gift of self-acceptance, compassion, and love. First to those who come to your mind, perhaps they're physically close to you or emotionally close to you. And we send out this wish, may they have happiness. May they be free from suffering, even the kind they bring on themselves. May their open-hearted joy increase. May they find peace and equanimity. We can let that luminosity expand, almost as if our close friends are now participating in it with us, and it shines out to strangers. and even to obstacle makers and enemies in our life. We can think, wow, if they were happy and free of suffering, they probably wouldn't be such jerks. So may they attain peace as swiftly as possible. And we'll just abide there for a moment, this sense that blessings are flowing into you, blessings of unconditional regard. They're waking up your intrinsic unconditional compassion and joy. And that shines throughout you and then out into the world like a gift. Also, skipping to the end, imagine, just to get the thrill of it, what it would be like if this totally finished its job and the world was filled with these blessings of unconditional regard, tolerance and patience, open-heartedness. And then knowing that we have planted at least a tiny seed of this in our practice, we can bring this formal practice to a close for now. Come back to just basic mindfulness, drop all the methods, and just notice body, breath, and mind. And then giving yourself the suggestion to begin to come toward the surface. If you went into any deep and introverted states, just to float back up toward the more interpersonal level. When you're ready, you might deepen your breath or use one of those breath regulating techniques. And then when it's time, you can lift your gaze or open your eyes. Get a little stretch and we'll come back together. Finish this one off before lunch. Oh, yeah. All right, so this is the meditation. This is my own sort of secularization of a bunch of really deep yogic practices. I'd love to hear how that was for you, or if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to pop on or pop them in chat box. Good, you've been doing this one, Jim. In exactly that form or a different form?
I developed my own, where I use it when I'm doing the counting meditation. So what happens as these thoughts pop up, and some of them are less than positive parts of me, some of them are excessively, they worry, and I just give them a big hug.
Yeah.
I imagine them and I enfold them into me.
That's so cool.
And so I just bring them in. And so and they still pop up, even though I've been this is about 6 weeks I've been working on this one. And trying to share it with some of my clients.
Yeah.
Because self-loathing is one of the huge issues in therapy that I work with. And so I have them love those parts because they're still part of you.
Yeah.
So those self-loathful thoughts or excessive scheduling or projection or worrying about something you did 6 years ago that you can't do anything about, I just bring them in. I practice a virtual hug.
Yeah.
And enfold them. They get enfolded.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Self-compassion. So yeah, and do recall, any of you who want a little boost, sometimes if you do the physical self-hug, it strengthens that because the body believes what it feels. It thinks, oh, I'm getting hugged. I'm just doing this one right now. I did it to demonstrate, but now I'm staying here. Haha. So you can do your some people benefit from this one, the research shows. Some people like do this one, the research shows. And they're just so nice. They're just so nice to develop the felt sense of that unconditional positive regard. So kudos to you, my friend. Excellent. And one thing you bring up, which we'll do this afternoon, is it's the same skill we started to get into last time of foregrounding aspects of our attention and backgrounding. So like in the counting method that we did last time, a way to sabotage that would be to think, oh, I can only focus on the count. That type of tension will bring up more thoughts, actually. It's relaxation that quiets the body and mind. And so the thing is, oh, in spite of whatever else is going on, I'll come back to the count. It's the same thing here, but we're applying this now to the sense of compassion. And that's what we'll do this afternoon with emotions and shadow work and stuff. It's like, oh, in spite of how angry I am, or not in spite of, but like, in addition to how angry I am, I'm also committed to the practice of compassion. In addition to how ashamed I feel of breaking my own vows of conduct, I'm also committed to loving myself and knowing that I'm a changing dynamic being. And so the foregrounding, I liked how you said, they don't go away, those thoughts, but by our foregrounding, they're not the center of gravity. Compassionate awareness is the center of gravity. And then there's no problem that those are there. I mean, okay, don't tell anyone I told you the secret, but this is actually in like in Tibetan Tantra, they have these Dharma protectors and they look like demons. And they're like, oh, these are the protectors of the sacred. And what those are inside are all of your afflictive emotions when they're not in charge. When the guru is in charge, when wise friend is in charge, all the afflictive emotions can be, and it's just, oh, those are the energies of protection. Oh, there they are, they're dynamic. And then there's no problem. It's only when they want to sit in the teacher's seat and run the show that it becomes the problem. Okay, I'm getting into this afternoon's lecture. So anyway, love to hear that. Yeah, favorite one so far, the Dantian wake up. Doo, doo, doo. So cool. So cool. Love it. Am I a wise friend from the chat box? That's a nice thing to be. They do say in also in Tibetan tradition. So, there's the word, there's guru in these spiritual traditions, which comes from the same root as weighty. You can almost hear it, the guru and the weighty. And it actually comes into our word gravity. So if you had a guru, it meant you had a heavy. I got a heavy on my side. I do not claim that title for myself. And then sometimes the Tibetan translation is lama, which means lana mepa, which is none higher, none higher. So like in your life, like my sifu really was, who is now passed, but he was a lama to me. Like he was like top of the charts, man. And he was like totally human. He demonstrated foibles and stuff, and that made it even better because he was just like a cool grandpa. And that could get in the way some preposterous, pompous spiritual leader never would be able to. So he was Lama to me. Okay, I don't claim that title either, but the old version for more of the kind of work we're doing is they called them the spiritual friend, Gewa Shenyan, which became the name of the doctorate degree in the Gelugpa system. They call them Geshe. The Gewa Shenyan means your spiritual friend, Kalyana Mitra. And I find for me, like receiving teachings and transmissions and stuff, if I think of it in terms of like, oh yeah, here's a friend who wants to convey a quality to me, like that really works. And so if I get to participate in that for you, what an honor. Hell yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah, the wise friend who has always been there. Deborah Dove, I don't know what this word means that you put in there. Maybe you can explain it to me. Guru, they do say means dispelled of darkness, and I believe that refers to the Bij mantras, Gu and Ru. relate to like light and darkness, but it's not the technical translation of the term, to my knowledge. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. Okay, Deborah, what do you say?
Havening is the practice of going like this. It's a bilateral stimulation. And this was in response to James talking about the self-hug.
I like it, like making a haven.
Yeah.
Cool,
Like
I hadn't learned this one. Now it's in my repertoire.
Kind of a version of the butterfly hug, but
yeah. Thanks for being my wise friend right now.
Thanks for being one of my wise friends.
All right. Anything else? Any questions on these? Any problems with that meditation? Like, because these won't work for everyone, but if there's a technical difficulty, there's usually a workaround. So if you wanted to play that one, you could. So, but it seems like it was pretty straightforward for y'all, right? Cool. So my job is just to give you a number of practices and notions, and then take the ones you like, throw out the ones that you don't. They might not even make the final edit of this curriculum. So we might both throw them out. Who knows? But it's about having some experiences together that might be illuminating and illustrative. So I'm grateful for you participating in that with me. Yeah, the problem, way too relaxed. Totally. I feel you there. Usually these nights we have to order pizza or something at the end to be like, oh, back down. And my partner's also teaching a retreat today, so we're definitely going to have to order out, because both of us are going to be three strides above planet Earth at the end of the day. Anyway, it's 1:05. Hey, that's cool. Oh wait, we go till what time? Till 2:30 is lunch. So let's do it at 2:30, if you don't mind me taking 5 minutes out of your 90 minutes. So 85-minute lunch. I hope that's sufficient. If not, be a rebel, come back late, whatever, but I'm starting without you. So there you go. This goes to both ways, buddy. And when we come back, we're going to do some more silent sitting, some emotional integration, and at the end, we'll do some super secret alchemy stuff, which should be hella fun. And I'm grateful you're here. It's been fun so far. See you after lunch. 2:30 Pacific. See you then.